Hi, this is Mike Ignatoski, the creator of the GreenFox spreadsheet, the spreadsheet that uses Excel programming to make it behave like a computerized baseball scorebook or score sheet. It also automatically computes the game stats, which can be a big time saver. And even better, GreenFox can be configured to operate in one of three different league modes where it can track the cumulative stats for all players and teams in the league. This is a continuation of a previous video called Custom League Creation with Historical Team Rosters Step by Step. This is part 2. The first video was part 1, so if you haven't watched that video, you should watch it first so that this video makes sense where it's starting off. Okay, here we are back at the roster sheet. I've completed updating all my duplicate player names so that I'm ready to move on to the next step. But before I do, I want to just clarify I guess I would say the message that it showed on the pop-up window that said when you have a duplicate player name, you need to delete one or change the ID and lineup name of one of them, which is technically true, but as I demonstrated and as I will state now, I think you should always change both players. Change the lineup name for both because you want to easily be able to know what team a player is on when you see that lineup name and not have to think that, oh, Elrod with the BAL, that's Baltimore, but when you just see it saying Elrod Hendricks, you have to remember that that's the Yankees one. That doesn't make sense. So I strongly recommend change the lineup name and ID for both players each time, and that way it's easier to keep track of which team they're on. Okay, enough said about that. Now let's attempt to revalidate this rosters sheet. I'll click that. You can see it changed it to locked. Now we get the wonderful message telling us it's valid and that it will be locked like it is. We can still make changes if we want to, if we just thought of something we needed to do, add a player, whatever we're going to do. You can unlock it and go through the process again. But it says if your rosters are complete, you can go to the league sheet and click the validate league settings to continue configuring your league. And that's what we're going to do. I say okay. I go down here to the league. I say validate. Alright, click the validate button. It jumps around. It says great news, a standings sheet has been successfully configured. Although it scrolled down a bit so we really can't see it, but I guess you have to take its word for it for right now. It says if you want to alter anything, you'd have to go back to your league sheet and make changes and then revalidate your updated settings until it's the way you want it. But ours, I think, is the way we want it, but we'll double check it in a second. I'm going to say OK. It jumps us back to the league sheet and gives us this next window of great news saying our league configuration appears to be valid. The next step is to lock the league settings. The league must be locked before you can start playing games in it. And when you lock your league settings, you cannot change them. And this includes the settings you can't change would be the number of teams, the names of your teams, the IDs of your teams, your player IDs and their lineup names. It says no player can be removed from the league for cumulative stats reasons. In theory, you could take somebody out that if they never played, but it's best to say don't take them out. You don't have to use them. You also can't change the standing structure. Say, oh, now this team's going to be in a different division or a different sub league or whatever. Once you lock your league, you can't update those. But there are some things that you can do once your league is locked, and those are listed here, which is you can always change maybe player ratings for different things. You can always add games to your league schedule, which we didn't even talk about yet, but we will. You can add a player to a team roster, or add a player to the league basically. And You can also change a player's team at any time in your league. You go and update your roster and switch the team ID that they're on, and then they'll be on that new team. You may need to also change any default lineups that if they're already in there. But anyway, and the last thing here it says is locking your league is required in order to modify this to basically to update the score sheet to work in league mode. Do you want to lock it now? Right now I'm going to say no. I think usually you would say yeah because I want to look at the standing sheet that it said was so great that we never even saw. So I'm going to say no. And I want to go to the standing sheet and scroll up. I need to fix this so it doesn't. But here is our league standings sheet. And it's always good here to do a sanity check that it looks the way you wanted it to look when we first started out this video of me writing down what those standings would kind of look like. And this looks good. I see the name of my league up here. These are my sub-league names. These are my 4 National League teams I picked. These are my 4 American League teams that I picked. You can see right here is where it shows this division name where, if you remember, I wrote in team because it really, with only one division, it doesn't make sense. You know, what would I say? This is the Americans Division 2 within the Americans sub-league it's kind of redundant. So by just saying, making my division name team, it makes it look not so lame. So this looks good. So minor things I'll show up here are this show or hide team IDs. Usually you don't need them, but if you wanted them, you could click this and it would show these IDs next to your teams if you wanted to show that. This show or hide league sub league names. I think for here you would definitely want it because you have 2 sub leagues. But if you only had 1 sub league, you wouldn't need it. It'd probably be redundant with the name of your league, so you could click that and hide it if you wanted to. And the last thing would be if you're going to have ties in your league, you know, there's a ties column here that's typically hidden. There's also a button to recompute the standings if you needed to, but we don't need to do that. So that's how the standings sheet works. I'll take these IDs off for now and just leave it like this for now. Okay, that looks good. Back to the league sheet. So now I'm going to validate again, but this time I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to kind of look at this thing to kind of see where we are in this process. So step 7 is lock the league settings. So let's click this again. It should. So now it shows our standings again. But this is what we just saw with the lock. I'm going to say yes, I'm good with it. So it says, awesome. You're one step closer. So now it says, if you want to configure any custom info or ratings for your league players, you could. So this is done using the config sheet first and the MPL or the master player list sheet second. And it can be entered or modified at any time during your league season. We're not going to do that right now. I'll explain in a minute. After you click OK, the score sheet will be configured to operate in league mode. And this will allow you to track cumulative stats for all teams and players. Important custom league info. So we're looking at a custom league, so this is important. It says you must have at least 1 game on the schedule sheet to play a game. You should have a default starting batting lineups configured on the LG lineup sheet before playing a game. And best of luck with your league. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. It's going to do a couple things here on the score sheet. It says setting the score sheet to league play mode. So one thing it does is it shows this button, which is this reload league info, and the show hide ID. That's not available in free play mode because the players really don't have IDs. So I'm going to say OK. Oh, up here it does switch it. Before it said question mark league, now it says league CSTM for the custom league. set score sheet league play activated. Click the game ID cell, which is right up here, to load the lineups and info for a game. Enjoy. I say OK. This is awesome. Here, your league's looking great, but here are some final considerations. Here's something else about the info thing, which I'm going to ignore for right now. 2, it says you need to enter your team default starting lineups, and it mentions the schedule again. But your score sheet is ready. So here it shows us the custom league team lineup. So let's see what we got to do here. Okay, so here we are at this custom league team lineups sheet. The sheet name is actually the LG lineup sheet, but you can see over here it lists all 8 teams in our league, and it has columns for these 4 different lineups. And first I'm going to click this help button here, which is going to really just shift the sheet, scroll it over to the right, and kind of show how this thing works. So you can click on the name or ID that will collapse a team's lineup area. These are the names of the lineups: the versus lefty, the versus righty, lineup 3, and lineup 4. And those names of those lineups cannot be changed. And you click that name to launch the lineup editor, and you can add a little note to it if you want to. So one thing I think you can kind of tell maybe already is the next step in how do you want your league to work has to do with the whole lefty-righty or lefty-righty splits. I heard it called different ways, but basically it comes down to in your game, when you're in your plate appearance for a given pitcher against a given batter, do you care whether the pitcher is a lefty or a righty and how the player is batting? Does that determine or make a difference of what the result of that plate appearance is? If it doesn't, then you're basically kind of ignoring the whole lefty-righty part of the game, which is fine. A lot of times that's kind of a simpler version of the game, and sometimes it's faster to play, and that's okay. And in that situation, this versus lefty is basically considered the default lineup, meaning if the Pirates are playing the Orioles, it doesn't matter if Mike Cuellar or Jim Palmer, whoever's pitching, it doesn't matter if they're a lefty or righty. The basic lineup for the Pirates is going to be the same. So that brings me really to, I'm going to jump back here to this league sheet to look at these directions here. So we just did this lock league settings, and I'll talk about this in a second. But this number 9 here, where it says options sheet, choose the league settings for your lefty-righty split stats. And that's really what we were just talking about. So really, I should maybe have if you want another pop-up message, but in order to really, before you configure your lineups, that's what you have to have figured out, is whether you're going to be using those lefty-righty things or not. And there's an option, a game option that you need to set. So down here in this options sheet, you see right here, these are the game options. And number 10 is what we're talking about. The auto load lefty or versus righty lineup based on the opposing starting pitcher. This is a custom league only feature. And by default, I think it'll be off, which means you're not using that. You just have one lineup per team. But if you're going to use it, if you're going to have a default lefty lineup and a default righty lineup, you'll want it on. So let's put it on. In this case, I'm going to put it on. I'll click that. And this basically just says what I was just saying. And I'm going to update my game options. And it says they're updated and jumps you back to the score sheet. We could confirm, yes, that's what it is. So now I'm going to go back to this LG lineup and make my lineup. Okay, back to the lineup sheet. So one other thing you'll have to know is how or if you're going to use DH or pitchers batting in your league. And so because I have this league set up with, even though in 70 the pitchers hit, but in 76 they didn't in the American League, I'm going to say the American League or the Americans League teams will use the DH, whereas the National League will let the pitchers bat. That's fine. So let's make a lineup for the 76 Yankees. So if I pick the Yankees here, I click this versus lefty. I don't actually know their exact lineup, but it doesn't really matter for this exercise. So I get this pop-up window. Here are all their batters. Plus it always adds this pitcher spot at the end if you want to use it. But basically you can either double click a name here and it'll drop it over here in this lineup area, or you could just click once and then click this, and it always puts the new people in at the bottom. So that's all I'm really going to do right now. Let's see, what do I got here? Anyway, sorry. Okay, so these are my 9 players. I'm going to put Mason. There's no drag and drop in this, so you got to use these little buttons here to move them around. So I apologize for that, but I think it's pretty doable. But basically, once you have them in essentially the order that you want, white down. Oh yeah, if you double click, it moves them all the way to the bottom. Okay, let's go with this. And now I need to assign these positions. Because if I said, okay, save this, it'll say, hey, you can't have these positions of a question mark, so fix it. So here I would just go through and say, all right, Mickey Rivers, he's playing center. Chambliss, you click the name, and you click over here on this little kind of like position picker, it's called, but it kind of shows the baseball field in its general representation layout. He's at first, Munson's catching, Carlos Maysby the DH, put Gamble in right, Nettles at third, Randolph at second, White in left, and Mason at short. Okay, so actually I'm going to put Mason at third just to intentionally do it wrong, and then if I say save this, it'll say nobody's at shortstop at position 6, so I fix that. So it won't let you save an invalid lineup, I don't believe. So we'll move him to position 6 and then save it, and it saved it. So let's kind of look at this. I'm going to click over here on the Yankees to expand. You see now here's their lineup. It puts in the positions. It also looks at that rosters data to show what they bat. Now let's say I want to put in the righty lineup for the Yankees, and let's assume that it's mostly the same except for maybe I'm going to switch the shortstop to Fred Stanley. Okay, so I'll click this versus righty, but instead of doing all this, I'm just going to use this and say copy it from the lefty. So it kind of closes it and reopens it and says, okay, here you go. So now all I'm going to do is say, all right, I'm going to take Fred Stanley and put him in there, and click Mason, and then click this to move him out like that. And I'll say that's good enough. So I'll save that. You can see here it always shows which lineup name you're working on. Oh, I didn't give Stanley the position. Okay, now if I can go back and kind of confirm, these are my two lineups now that I have. I could make these other ones, but right now, these are the ones I want to make. So you do that for for other teams. You don't have to do them all at the beginning of your league, but you really should do it before you play a game. So I'll go ahead and put in the lineups for the 73 A's because I'm going to make that our first game on the schedule, and then we'll pick it up from there. Okay, back at the lineup sheet, I entered the A's lineups, as you can see, and we already had the Yankees. I do want to show one more thing on the Dodgers lineup that I kind of alluded to, but as far as if you want the pitcher to bat, this pitcher acts just like another player. And the only extra rule that comes into play is you can't have the DH position and the pitcher in the lineup. It'll tell you that you can't do that. So that's that. So now that we've done that, I'm going to touch a little bit on this thing we've heard a lot about in these pop-up menus with the rating info stuff. So right after this position thing, there's some hidden columns in here where you can show custom ratings or info for each batter. And up here you can see there's these 5 columns for ratings for pitchers. And I'm just going to briefly show something here and but not go through the whole thing. I'm not sure what's up with this. But in general, here's where you define those columns or fields that you want to track. So for instance, you could do steal or speed or their throwing arm or some other kind of defense thing. There's whatever you want to put in, and you could then you put an X for which ones you want to use, and then if I say okay, I'm going to use these for my batters, and then for my pitchers I'm going to have this endurance and some kind of strikeout rating. I'll just put in 2 right now. But I could click this and say, yeah, this is what I want to use. And you can see now, well, first it says, I updated the batter stuff. Should I do the pitcher stuff too? I'll say, yeah. Okay. So you can see here on the score sheet, it added these columns for these things, as well as over here in the pitchers, it put these 2 labels in for the A and the B on both pitchers down here. And what I really want to say is, although, and these then get transferred over to the rosters sheet, you see these labels now reflect what I just entered. And if I go on this master player list, which gets populated when you lock your league, you could enter your data in for all of these players. But I guess the 2 things I want to say. One is I've already created a video on YouTube that details step by step how to use these custom ratings for your league, for the batters and for the pitchers. So I'm not going to go through it now. But the other thing I want to say is I really suggest that you play at least a game, maybe 2 games, maybe part of a game, but without any of these ratings, without using any of these ratings, and to kind of really determine what you really need to make the flow of your game better. I think it's easy to get enamored with putting in all these cool ratings, but you're still going to be playing your game, and if these ratings are easily accessible, whether on the player's card or on this chart or whatever, it's a lot of work to enter this stuff in for a couple hundred players if you're going to use them. Even though you don't have to, you can enter them for as many players as you want. You don't have to enter them for all of them, but it's still work, and I feel like it's good to really figure out which ones are really helping you out to play your games more efficiently and which ones aren't. And therefore, I'd say only put them in if you really know you need them. So I'll let that go, and then I'm going to go back to the config sheet and turn these all off. Just going to clear these cells out. Delete, and then say yeah, and it'll set these back to hide those columns again. Okay, that's all I want to say about the rating stuff. Okay, so now we're back at the score sheet. We know that we were told the score sheet's ready for the games, but we know we don't have any schedule set. We go to the schedule sheet, there's nothing here. But from the score sheet, the way you load a game is by clicking this game ID, which we were told already. So if I click this game ID, it'll activate the schedule sheet, and then it says pick the game ID of the game you want to play on the score sheet. Well, the problem is here we are, but there is no game, so we need to enter a game. And this kind of works the same way the roster sheet does as far as locking and unlocking, because it's something that you can modify in a controlled way. So we'll unlock the schedule. We'll click that. So now you can see it changes this lock status to unlocked. Gives us another one of these lovely pop-up windows, which I don't want to demean them because they do have useful information, especially if you haven't seen them before. But it says that the schedule is now unlocked and you can be edited. And this includes adding or removing games. Shouldn't remove any game that's already been played. I'll say that. But while it's unlocked, you can't load a game into the score sheet. You have to lock it first. For a custom league, that's us, the yellow column headers indicate the required fields. So you can see here, the absolute minimum to enter a game are these 5 fields. The game ID, which has to be unique for every game in your league. The visiting team's ID, the home team ID, and the visitor and starting pitchers, their lineup name. It says, in addition to locking the schedule, clicking the lock schedule will automatically recompute the number of scheduled games and complete. That's this little mini table right here. So I entered my A's and the Yankees lineup. So let's put in a game for that. So I'm just going to start here. I'm going to call this Game 1. And my visiting team, let's say that's going to be the Yankees. So I remember that's NYY. If you're not sure, you can always go over to your league sheet and see what they are, or you can go to the lineups, the LG lineup sheet, and that also shows the IDs. So let's get back to this. So I'm going to have the Yankees, and then the home team is going to be the A's. And now I just have to enter the starting pitcher. So right now, I'm working on a way to make this a little easier, but right now you could just type it in. But you could also go over to the rosters and look. In all likelihood, if you're going to make a league like this, somewhere you'd probably have some kind of rotation. But right now there's no place for it in this spreadsheet, although maybe in the future there will be, but right now there isn't. So, but you can make a new sheet down here and put your own rotation in some place. So I'm going to use this filter and say just show me the Yankees and the A's, and then just show me these pitchers. Okay. And when I'm going to even use this little roll here and say, just show me the guys that are pure starters. While I'm here, I'll mention this stint column, which is only for historical leagues, really. It does indicate guys that played for multiple teams in a year and just kind of what order they played for those teams. But in a custom league, it means nothing. Okay, so who's going to start for the Yankees? I'll say it's going to be Ed Figueroa. So I could either type his name in, just, or I could be lazy. I'm going to right click and say, copy it. And I'll go over to the schedule. I could paste it in. I'm going to show one thing here, which is I'm going to right click and use. I like using this paste values because that way it doesn't take any formatting with it and kind of jack up your formatting. So if I say just paste the value, it just puts in the name. These names have to be exact, the exact way they are on the rosters, otherwise it'll not pass the test. Similarly, let's go to the back to the roster sheet and see who we want pitching for the A's. Let's go with Catfish Hunter. I guess we could have had Catfish against Catfish. That would have been kind of exciting. But we'll pick Catfish O'Connor for Oakland. So I hit Control C to copy it. And then over here I'm going to right click and click on this paste value with the numbers. Okay, so that's all I have to put in here. I may want to put something, I could put something in here if I hover on this game type. This, and just if you want to use it, it would really distinguish between a regular single game and games of a doubleheader. So I can maybe put that in there. I can put in a 0, and here this day night is D for D, N for night. I want to say this is a day game. This is optional. You don't have to put this in. And I'm going to say this is here, so I'm going to say this is at the Oakland Coliseum. You can put whatever you want in there. Okay. Similarly with these other things you could put in. But now, like on the roster sheet, you need to lock this. And when you try to lock it, it does validation in the background. So I'm going to say lock this. That's what you want to see. Success. It looks valid. There's a little disclaimer in there somewhere, but okay. So now that I have done that, it's locked. You can see now it says, okay, scheduled games now is 1. There's been no completed games. But now that it's here, I could click this game ID to load this game into the score sheet. So let's try that out. Beautiful. It worked. So let's go through the details and see what it actually just did. Okay. Here we are in the score sheet. You can see what it did here. First it put in this game ID, which is game 1. Here it is the game description, which is basically the 2 team names, visitor at the home, and here it says the stadium or the park, and this is whether it's day or night. Here it lists the visiting team. Here it lists the home team starting pitcher. Here's the visiting team starting a lineup. You can see it fills them in the scoreboard here, and these labels over here. Similarly, down here would be the Yankees, the visitor starting pitcher Ed Figueroa, and the A's starting lineup, along with their positions. A couple things I want to mention here. One is in this custom league play, it adds this feature, I guess you'd say, into the leadoff spot in the 4th position here, the 4th row of this load lineup. So we should first confirm whether it loaded the right lineup. So the Catfish Hunter is a righty, so this should be the versus righty lineup. So let's just kind of focus in on this 9th spot, Fred Stanley, because that is kind of our telltale thing of which lineup it loaded. So if we go over here to the LG lineup, let's click the Yankees. So if we look here, the lefty lineup, batting 9th is Mason, and the righty is Stanley. So that looks good. And for the A's, going up against Figueroa, who I believe also is a righty. I guess I should double check that. Yeah, Figueroa throws right. I can look here at the roster sheet. So this should be our righty A's lineup. Let's see if I guess I didn't make anything distinguishable for lefty and righty on there. I should do that next time, but I believe it worked properly. So it does that. But what I want to mention is this load. Sorry, this load lineup link here is if for some reason I wanted to play a different lineup. Like for some reason, let's say I used lineup 3 on my league lineup sheet here for the Yankees and or the A's, and maybe I had lineup 3 that said this is when I go up against a righty that's worse against righties, then I want to use this lineup. I could. So that's what the idea here is. If for some reason you didn't want to use the automatic lineup, which is the one versus left or right, you could click this load lineup spot right here, cell, and it would say, hey, do you want to load a different one? You know, so it says what team you're talking about, who's the opposing starting pitcher, Catfish Oak, Hunter, he throws right, and here it shows what lineups are available. We've only entered 2, this versus lefty and versus righty. But just for fun, I'm going to say, actually, I want to use my versus lefty lineup instead. So, okay. So then it would load that lineup. So now you can see Mason's playing short now instead of Stanley. So that's what that does. I don't think it's used a lot, but it could. I mean, you could maybe have 2 different lineups if you have somebody that gets hurt for a few games. You don't want to change all your lineups. You might just make a temporary lineup and put it in lineup 3 or something like that. Another thing I wanted to mention here is maybe you want to, for some reason, change just one position because maybe one guy's hurt. I don't know. Maybe you just want to switch one thing. So let's say here I didn't want to DH Carlos May. I want to DH somebody else. So before you start your game, I could click anybody in my starting lineup here, and it'll say, hey, do you want to change Carlos May? You want to pick somebody else? I'm going to say yes. And what this will do then is bring up this visitor substitution window of people on the bench, and it would list everybody that's on the bench right now for the Yankees, all the batters, and then here's where it would show those positions that they played, if that matters to you. But I'm going to say, even though I don't have to pick somebody that played DH, I'll take Piniella. I'm going to say I'm going to play Piniella this game, and by doing so, it'll drop in Piniella here. And then if we go down to this other sheet called the LG subs for a league game, the subs, this is where it lists all the subs for the games. So you have all the people on the bench up here at the top, and here you have the pitchers in the bullpen. So you can see here, now that I did that, Carlos May is now on the bench where he was in the starting lineup before. So anyway, that's, and you can do the same with the starting pitcher. If for some reason you needed to switch it, you could. Although if you change it here, it doesn't change it on the schedule, so you're better off almost changing it there if you want a better record of it. But anyway, so that's all I really wanted to say about, configuring your league, setting it up. I guess one more item related to the schedule is, you can put in multiple games at once. You could put in one game at a time. however you want to do it. Like I said, you may have some spreadsheet or something else that has some schedule creation tool that maybe you can use to create your entire league schedule that you could work into a spreadsheet and copy or paste it into here. That's up to you. So although this is very, it's not automatic. You have to provide the schedule. I do think it's flexible, especially because you don't have to have it all figured out at the beginning. You could figure it out as you go if you want to. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this video of how to configure a custom league using historical team rosters. I hope that this is something you could find beneficial and maybe inspiring to you to enter your and create your own league, and so it's to track the schedule, the games, and especially the stats. I'll make another video as a follow-up to this of how to play this game and then how to save the stats for this game, as well as save them in the cumulative stats tables. So thanks a lot for watching. Well, that wraps up this GreenFox video. I hope you found it helpful. But either way, I'd appreciate any feedback, whether it's what you liked about the video or the spreadsheet, or things you didn't like about the video or spreadsheet, or ideas that you have to make either the videos or the spreadsheet to make it work better. I appreciate all the feedback. Thanks again for taking the time.